Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your perseverance. Could you just say a brief word about what the Ryan budget would do to early childhood education and the future of our next generation?
So again, we showed it earlier, relative to other nations, today we're about 25th in providing access to early learning opportunities, and that is not a badge of honor. And we want to do everything we can to increase that. The average child coming from a disadvantaged community starts kindergarten a year to 14 months behind. And we have a budget that has 15% cuts. That will mean not more children, obviously, but less children having access. And when we send children to kindergarten underprepared, that is not that child's fault, but we often don't catch them up. And when we think about long-term dropout rates, incarceration rates, I wonder how many of those young people we could have saved by giving them access to high-quality early learning opportunities. And I'll be clear, it has to be a continuum, a seamless continuum from birth through age 5.
Thank you. A lot has been said about school discipline, and one suggestion is more school resource officers. A lot of people have suggested that their major contribution is actually promoting the school-to-prison pipeline because they end up arresting the children rather than protecting the children. What is the evidence that you've seen say about school resource officers?
So we think whether it's school resource officers or more counselors or more social workers or better trained school resource officers, that's the key. And we're doing everything we can to fight the school-to-prison pipeline. As you know, we have been explicit in putting out the data around that. I think some school resource officers do a fantastic job, and others are frankly part of the problem. And so making sure that when we're trying to create a safe environment and a safe climate and a safe culture, which we're all trying to do, that we are not, the first instinct is not to call 911 when there's a challenge.
Do you have studies that followed this?
I'll have to check on that and get back to you.
Thank you. On student loans, how much money does the government make on student loans a year?
Well, I think there are all kinds of projections on what folks think we may or may not make, and if you look at the GAO study, the title of the study basically says it's impossible to predict this. Just to be clear, we have no interest in making money on student loans.
Well, one estimate was about around $10 billion a year. Does that sound about right?
I don't know. Lots of different estimates out there. Again, Congress controls those rates. Congress worked together to prevent rates from doubling. And if Congress is interested in taking this up, we'd be happy to have that conversation.
Do you know how much it would cost to get the interest rate down close to zero?
I don't know.
Have you studied the effect of the summer Pell Grant that was elimination of the summer Pell Grant a couple of years ago?
I don't know the details there. Obviously, we worked really hard to see a $40 billion increase in Pell Grants about going back to taxpayers for nickel. And we've gone from about 6 million Pell recipients to almost 9 million. It's about a 50% increase. That's one of the things I'm most proud of. We weren't able to keep the summer Pell, which was disappointing. But big picture, the fact that we're serving almost 3 million more young people, as you know, many first-generation college goers feel very, very good about that.
So no one has looked at the effect of the elimination of the summer Pell Grant? Because a lot of people were going to school right through, now have to kind of skip the summer, and it kind of lengthens out the time they're out of work.
Yeah, no, I'm sure folks are doing some analysis there.
One problem we had in our area a couple of years ago was on upward bound competition, where we had our area, the state had 5 upward bound programs, all performing adequately. When the dust settled on the competition, none of them got refunded, and none of the children in the area had access to an upward bound program. In these competitions, do you do anything to make sure that at least in each area somebody gets funded so that the children in that area are served?
Yeah, we try and make sure we have geographic diversity. Obviously, given the limited amount of funds, I wish we could ensure that across the nation we were funding in every community, but the reality is frankly far from that.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman,
okay, the gentleman yields back his questioning time. He is now recognized for,
thank you.
for his closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the Secretary for his perseverance and for his very enthusiastic support of our next generation. We need to make sure we have the appropriate investments in education. We're falling behind, as the Secretary has mentioned, in a lot of measures where we were leading. We're way back in the pack. Our competitive advantage in a global economy is a well-educated workforce, and if we lose that, we're not going to be able to compete on wages. We're not going to be able to compete on anything else. That's our main focus of competition, and we have a lot of work to do to restore ourselves to #1 in the world. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record a letter from the Committee for Education Funding, which points out a lot of problems with the Ryan budget, particularly pointing out that it's billions below even the post-sequester caps established by the Bipartisan Budget Act, and cuts a lot of important programs.
Without objection.
You're back.
Gentleman yields back.